Hi, Mohammed, how are you?
Yes, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Um, so I'll just maybe introduce myself a bit first. So I'm Chibuzo Ejogu. You can call me Chi. I have a PhD in human resource management. I've been teaching HR for over 10 years now in different universities in the UK. And I've also been a practitioner of HRM for multinational companies, including FTSE 100 companies in the UK. So my background is very much HRM management, organizational behavior. I've also done a bit of management consulting. I work in industries. Originally from Nigeria, now based in the UK for many years now. And I think I'll be your tutor on this unit, on this module, strategic HRM, which I enjoy quite a lot teaching for the next few weeks, I think. So you want to tell me where you're based right now?
Actually, I'm originally from Pakistan, and currently I am in Sudan. I'm working here for Ericsson. Basically, I'm by profession I'm an engineer. So since last 7 years, I've been working in the telecommunication sector. I'm basically as a solution architect here in Ericsson and providing the services to the operators here in Sudan.
Okay, wow, that's fantastic to know. Right, so we may or may not get others joining, so I think we'll just crack on and see how we get on. If others join, that'll be okay. Is that okay? I'm assuming you've done some other units with UK Versity before, so you're familiar with the IT?
Yes.
That's good. Okay. So let's look at the unit specification. So I'm guessing you have access to this on your Moodle. You'll see a unit specification document. So I'll just introduce the units to you and then we'll teach the class for today.
Okay. So we will start with unit 3 out of all the 6 units. So we will be starting with this unit number 3, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the way they are designed, you don't have to start in any particular order. They are self-contained units. So we'll start with.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't have to start with any particular unit. So we'll be looking at strategic human resource management. Obviously, it's a unit 7, level 7 unit, which is master's level. We expect you to put in some extra hours. So when we look at the total qualification time, it includes both teaching time and the extra study you have to do, obviously, to pass the assessment. So we expect you to do some reading on your own, right? And it will be to pass through. So the aim of this unit is to develop your understanding of how effective strategic management of human resources supports organizational objectives, organizational performance, organizational success, competitive advantage in different contexts. So obviously you are in Sudan, so the context in Sudan and in that part of Africa is quite different from Western Europe, Eastern Europe, America, and so on. So we'll be looking at also small and large corporations have different contexts. And more multinational corporations have a different context from more local organizations. So, and all of this will affect your strategic HRM. So we'll be looking at different HRM in different contexts. We'll be looking at the contribution of strategic HRM and the application of leadership and management theory to benefit the company, the organization. So we have 5 learning outcomes, and we tend to do one lesson on each outcome, right? So today we'll be probably looking at outcome 1, understanding the role of the management of human resources, justifying the importance of HRM, looking at some models of HRM, assessing the role and purpose of HRM in the organization and the related functional areas. Future units will be looking at creating a HR plan for your organization. We'll be looking at understanding the role of legal and ethical issues in developing your HR policies. We'll be looking at planning and developing human resource strategies. And we'll be looking at understanding HRM approaches within organizations and the relationship to organizational performance. We'll do a bit of that today because that's also very foundational, the link between HRM and organizational performance. So please stop me at any point if you've got a question. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Stop me and ask questions, or tell me if I'm going too fast or too slow or anything.
All right.
Um, there will be an assessment which will be 4,500 words, and subsequently we'll talk about it, and we'll probably have a dedicated session just to prepare you for the assessment. So what I like to do is I like to teach the units and then have a assignment support session where we discuss and give you all the support for that so that you can go on and write it. So the indicative content gives an indication of the kind of topics we'll be covering. So we'll be looking at critical explanation of nature and importance of HRM, the HRM model, starting with that today. We'll be assessing the role and purpose of strategy and link with HRM. We're looking at the contribution of HR to the organization. How do we evaluate it? How do we measure it? What's important in it? We'll be analyzing different business factors that impact on how you structure your HRM department, how you do HRM in your organization. We'll be looking at key HR human resource requirements. And then we'll be looking at, so this has to do with the role of the external factors in shaping your HR policy and strategies. And then we'll be looking at developing a HR plan for your organization in terms of your workforce plan, your skill plan, your retention plan, and so on. We'll be looking at the purpose of your HR policy and what the content of the HR policy or policies, the impact of regulatory and legal requirements on HR. So HR is very, very focused or very, very heavily influenced by employment law in each country, and that's why HRM in each country is different. So the employment is a big key influencer in how we do HR. Analyzing impact of ethical requirements in HR, looking at organizational strategy, structure, and culture, and how that impacts on HR, proposing effective and appropriate HR strategies. Obviously, you have to do that for your assignment. Critically monitor effectiveness of HR management and ability to provide recommendations to improve HR practice and strategy. Relationship between people development and HR, so looking especially at employee development and organizational development. And then a bit about the underpinning theories to HR, things like strategic theories will be looked at, a few strategic management theories will be looked at, a few organizational theories will be looked at, and so on, by Handy, Charles Lindsberg, and Max Weber, and so on. And then the interrelationship between employee relations and HR practices. So obviously, how you relate with your employees, how you treat them, either as individuals or collectively through, for instance, trade unions, is a key aspect of successful HRM in every organization. So then we'll be looking at things like recruitment selection, motivation and performance appraisal, employee retention, leadership, leadership in different contexts, creating HR strategies that support organizational mission, vision, and values, and then monitoring and evaluating your HR strategy. We have some recommended textbooks. You should have these available through the UK Versity e-library. And if there's any particular one you don't have, obviously if you shoot them an email, you should be able to get it. But the book by Reason Smith is quite useful. This core text by Reason Smith, so it's a good one. The textbook by Bratton, if you see the additional reading, the one by Bratton is also good, organizational leadership and so on, Buchanan and Brzezinski and so on. So we've got a good textbook, but the one by Reason Smith is quite good. So that's a quick overview of the unit. Any comments, any questions so far?
Yeah, with regards to the books, how can I access the books, the recommended books?
So you should, on Moodle, when you go to Moodle, you should be able to see at least one textbook or two uploaded for this. Right, so start with those ones. If you find that they're not sufficient, then you can send them an email and they'll let you know how to access the other textbooks. But I know they have a library of textbooks. Yeah.
And for the assignments, how do I need to get an access for the textbooks, and how do I do the assignments?
Assignment, I think we'll look at it. We'll start looking at it from probably next session, but it looks like quite having a quick look at it now. I think there's a scenario, so it's like a case study scenario, and I think you have to do a presentation by PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah, one PowerPoint presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have references for your textbook, so
Okay.
the slide on your PowerPoint can be your reference slide. So that's task 2 of 3, another scenario, and then there'll be some written submission also in addition. So the assessment brief is up there. We'll have a look at it maybe at the subsequent session. But you basically do a presentation on an HR plan and a HR memo, which is basically a short essay. And then a report, all right, 2,000 word report. So that's it. PowerPoint presentation, which we regard as 1,000 words equivalent, your HR plan, quick HR memo, and then the HR report. So have a look at the, let me see the textbooks that have been uploaded for this module. I believe, let's see, so this one is a textbook. Let's see, I think it's Armstrong's. Let's see. So it's also a very good textbook. So on Moodle, you should be able to see this textbook that's going to open right now. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
So yeah, okay. So the one by Torrington, very very good textbook by Torrington. You should have access to it. It's very right. You should have that on Moodle, and that's the 9th edition. You have that one. Covers everything you need, to be honest. Most everything. Obviously. Yeah. It's taking time to load, so we'll just exit it now to save a bit of time. But that is the key textbook I think you have an access to. And then if there's any more, if you shoot them an email, they'll tell you how to access it. Because I know they have more textbooks than you can.
Okay.
Is that okay for now?
Yeah.
All right. So now let's look at the slides for today. We'll be looking at, let's see, quick slideshow. So we'll be looking at the learning outcome, the first learning outcome, understanding the role of strategic management of human resources. The aim of this unit, obviously, is to develop learners' understanding of effective and strategic HRM in different contexts. We've discussed that. So we'll start with definitions, always a good place to start. The idea of HRM, obviously, is managing people. And then strategic HRM is to manage that strategically. So you start looking at a long-term rather than a short-term approach to the way you manage people in your organizations, right? And then you start thinking about matching your HR strategy to your organizational strategy. So it's no use having an organizational strategy heading in one direction and the HR strategy heading in an opposite direction. The HR strategy needs to support whatever the organizational strategy is. So if, for instance, the organizational strategy is innovation, is to make money through innovation, then HR has to be doing innovation. It cannot be doing cost reduction. It cannot be going in an opposite direction. Right? So that's the idea of HR strategy. So very much focused on organizational goals. The concept of strategic HRM fairly new, started in the 1990s, and we distinguish, part of it is the distinguishing between strategy and strategic planning. In the past, strategy used to be just strategic planning, doing a plan, and then we always have problems with implementation, always have problems with moving it from the top down to the rest of the organization. So strategy or strategic management is a broader perspective that looks at not just the planning, but also the implementation, the review, and looks at strategy coming from both the bottom up, the top down, and so on and so forth. So then it also looks at having specific functional strategies, your marketing strategy, your HR strategy, your operation strategy, all interlinked and supporting each other. So that's the idea here. So what we'll be looking at in terms of HR strategy, good HR strategy creates value for the organization, helps the organization achieve its business goals, develop competitive advantage, get better performance. Those are the key indicators we'll be looking at to say that yes, this is your HR strategy makes sense for this organization. So we'll be looking at different models very soon of doing that. But what your HR strategy also wants to do is to ensure that the different aspects of HR support each other. So for instance, your recruitment needs to support your training, which needs to support your performance reviews and management, which needs to support your reward and so on. It's no good your recruitment doing something and your training doing something else. So that's the idea. The one key thing when it comes to business strategy is the idea of stakeholders. In the past, the business strategy used to focus on just one stakeholder, which was the shareholder, the owner of the company. So maximizing shareholder value. But now we are looking at a more ethical approach to business strategy, especially after the global financial crisis of 2008, where we are looking at your strategic management and therefore your HR strategy, taking in the interest of not just shareholders but also employees, who are your internal stakeholders, trade unions, local communities, so you don't pollute the environment, for instance, banks and financial institutions, government, and all these are your stakeholders. So no stakeholder is viewed simply as an input into the organization's value chain. Rather, they are all contributors to and recipients of, the shared value which your strategy creates for your organization. So a very important point for us is the idea that there's no single HRM strategy. What works for Ericsson, where you work for, may not work for Nokia, Microsoft, may not work for BMW, right? So we need to start thinking about best fit. We need to start thinking about fitting the HR strategy to the unique circumstances of the organization, the unique context, culture, and objectives of the organization. So that's the idea. So sorry, you will notice that I'm not going through every single sentence and word in the slides. The slides are there for you to read them up. I'm just highlighting the key points, right? So that you
can. Okay.
So now let's look at some of the key models of strategic HRM. Actually, let's start with the second model. Let's start with the matching model, right? So this matching model was developed by Fombrum, Tichy and Devana from the University of Michigan. So sometimes people call it the Michigan model or the matching model, right? And this is the full model. It says that basically your HR, if you look at the top corner, I'll just highlight that. The annotation. Sorry, one second. Let me just annotate that. Sorry, one second. So if you look at this top corner here, right, what it's saying is that you have your external forces, your political forces, your economic forces, your cultural forces from the external environment, your business environment. The economy in a recession, is it strong? What's the nature of the economy? Is it more manufacturing or service oriented or innovative and so on? The political forces going on, Trump's policy, UK's Brexit, EU policy, so on. The socio-cultural forces, obviously, you will notice that the Sudanese culture is very different from the Indian culture. So all of that, you need to match to your company strategy in terms of how it shapes your organization strategy, your organization structure, and your HRM strategy. So the first point from this model is you need to match your external environment, political, economic, and cultural forces, to your internal environment. And three key things you need to match there. Your structure must be one that fits your external environment. Your strategy as a company must be one that fits your external environment. And then your HRM must be one that fits your external environment, right? So the way we do HRM in Sudan or in a booming economy will be different from the way we do it in India in an economic recession. Now for HRM in particular, it identifies 5 key elements of HR that need to also match with each other. starting with selection, recruitment, and selection, how employees enter the company, needs to feed in and seamlessly and support their performance management, their ongoing performance and performance appraisal. That now needs to match or fit the way you reward employees for that performance and the way you develop and train your employees to improve that performance. So this is what we call the matching model or the Michigan model by Fombrun and colleagues. And we'll compare that very quickly with compare that very quickly with with the Harvard model. So this is another model of strategic HRM. So companies can choose either to go down the Michigan route or the Harvard route. It's called the Harvard model because Beer and his colleagues from the University of Harvard developed this model. Now, this model looks, first of all, at a range of stakeholder interests. You need to first of all identify who your key stakeholders are and what their interests are. Then you need to look at your external and internal environment, what you call situational factors. So these ones are situational factors. I'm just trying to edit it. Sorry. Yeah, so your situational factors here, right, and your internal and external environment, and your stakeholder interest. Now, based on that, you should develop your HR policies around what level of employee influence do you want the employees, what level of voice and influence do you want them to have in your company? Are you going to consult your employees in decisions or not? Your human resource flow, how do you want your HR to flow in terms of career progression, but also in terms of work systems, how work will move from one stage to the other, who hands off what process, who does what process, and who hands off to each other, and your reward, how you reward the employees, your reward systems. It also means if you adopt this model in a company, focusing on three C's, three main HR outcomes. You want to improve employee commitment. You want to improve congruence, that is, fit between different aspects of HRM and also between HRM and your organizational strategy. And you want to improve cost effectiveness. You want your HR to be cost effective. You don't want it to be too expensive. So if you come as a HR director to your CEO with a budget of £1 million, sometimes your CEO will kick back and say that is too expensive to spend on HR. And then it looks at long-term consequences, right? Your HR strategy needs to find a way to maximize individual health and well-being, organizational effectiveness, but also societal well-being, behaving ethically in the society, for instance, in terms of environmental pollution and ethical behavior, not being fraudulent, treating customers rightly, not cheating them, and so on. So this is an alternative model. We call this the Harvard model, right? So just a quick question to you, Mohammed.
Yeah.
Between the Harvard model and the Michigan model, if you are the HR manager of Ericsson, which one would you prefer to use?
I would say that seeing that this Harvard module, this seems more comprehensive, I think.
Okay.
It's like, it's basically, I can see that it's more HR based focused. It's like consequences. If you look at the end results, it's like more focused on individual well-being, and then also they have like organizational effectiveness. So that's why I would say that this is better model. It's
Very
more
good.
comprehensive.
Yeah. So we generally tend to consider the companies that adopt this Harvard model, we call them soft HRM, right? Because they want to bring out the soft side of HRM: employee commitment, employee satisfaction, employee happiness, employee health and well-being, societal happiness, so on and so forth. If you compare that with the Michigan model, we'll call that the hard model. This is the hard model, right? It's not really looking at the soft side of employees, of their commitment and so on and so forth. It's looking at them just as a means to make money. right?
Mm.
So how do you just manage your employees in a hard manner, manage them, performance manage them, reward them, and make money out of them. And also, this is more a short-term relationship with your employees, right? You're not looking at, like you say, long-term consequences. Also, this Michigan model, what I call a hard model, is it looks really only at the company and shareholder interest, doesn't look at stakeholder interest.
Mm.
So those are two different ways of looking at strategic HRM, and companies choose either way, and you can tell companies that have very soft HRM and employees, really get engaged with what the company does and they're passionate about their company and so on and so forth. And companies who have a more transactional, short-term relationship with you, you come, you do your job, you go, they pay you, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Um, some couple other models have also been developed. The one by David Guest emphasizes the link between HR and performance. So this is saying whether it's not necessarily saying you should do hard or soft. What it's saying here is whichever one you do, what is the link to organizational performance? What is your route to ensuring HR contributes to organizational performance, right? So the argument here is that your business strategy should inform the way you develop your HR strategy, right? If your business is heading in that direction, then your HR now starts heading in that direction. That will inform your HR practices, which can be effective or ineffective, right? Now, if you do it effectively, what are the outcomes that you need to emphasize? For him, they are competence, commitment, and flexibility, right? Employee commitment, very similar to what you saw in the Harvard model. Competence has to do with skills and training. So upskilling your workforce, and then flexibility. It's the ability of your organization to use its HR to adapt to different circumstances. So if you need to develop a new product, if customers' taste changes and you need new products and services, how quick can your HR adapt to producing that new product or service? If there's a high increase in demand for your goods and services, how quick can your HR meet that increased production? So if that leads to quality of goods and services and increased productivity, then that will lead to greater financial performance. So you can see very clearly from this model, the argument is if HR can develop competence, commitment, and flexibility, it will eventually lead to more money for the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is the route to linking your HR strategy to your organizational performance. A key argument there was flexibility. That's one of the key things he introduced in this model. If your HR doesn't provide effective flexibility to your organization, you will probably not be able to make that much money.
Your flexibility, like in terms of in terms of what, like employee flexibility, like they are flexible to, for example, relocate to one location to another,
Yes,
or
there
what
are
kind of?
different types of flexibility. So numerical flexibility, getting increase or reduction in your headcount to meet increase or reduction in production, demand for goods and services. Flexibility, functional flexibility in terms of different skills, employees that can do different skills. So if consumer tastes change and you need to develop a totally different type of product, they have the skills to start making that new product. Flexibility, mobility in terms of moving to new locations if you've got to open up a new branch in Dubai or China or whatever. So there are different ways of looking at flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Okay.
you're correct. Yeah, very good. So, very quickly now, the model by Bath, University of Bath, again looks at linking performance, organizational performance to strategic HRM. There's been this argument of it's very difficult to make a very clear link between HR and company performance because if Ericsson makes $10 million extra profit this year, right? Mohammed, can you say that that was a result of better HRM?
It could be because of yeah, I mean indirectly maybe it because of sales. So sales
Yes.
are performing well, so indirectly it's HR.
So that's the problem. The link is not direct; it's an indirect link, and there are many variables. HR can contribute, but your sales and marketing contributes, your operation contributes, the economy contributes. If it's in a recession or not, it contributes. So there's always been that argument of how best do we show or link the contribution of HRM to performance. So that's what this model by Guest and by the people at University of Bath, John Purcell and Professor Purcell and colleagues developed. So the key thing in this model I'll just emphasize here is what we call AMO, right? Can you see that? Ability, A for ability and skills, M for motivation and incentive, O for opportunity to participate. So basically, they say that your HR, which is all this stuff, training, recruitment, pay, work-life balance, teamwork, and all of this stuff, right? And this stuff, all these are different HR practices. Employee involvement, employee communications, all of that should increase, should be designed to increase three things: the skills and abilities of your workforce, so upskilling them, right? The motivation and incentive for that workforce to work. So it's one thing for your workers to be skilled enough to do the job, but they are not motivated. Or they can be motivated, but not skilled and not able, right? So you need both. You need both the internal motivation to work at their best, to give their 100%, and the ability and skills. But they also need the opportunity participate, the opportunity to deploy the skills and motivation. So again, you can have somebody who's highly skilled and able, who is very motivated, but the nature of the job and the style of leadership and management doesn't allow the person to contribute, doesn't give the person opportunity to contribute, right? So you'll find this a lot. Employees may have innovative ideas, but the organization just doesn't listen, doesn't give them the opportunity to participate. Employees may feel very motivated and able to contribute in a different project, or a different job role, but they are restricted to their current job role, current project. So for them, for the University of Bath, John Purcell, Professor Purcell and colleagues, this AMO emphasizing that HR provides the ability, the motivation, and the opportunity is the secret to the giving a good organizational performance, showing HR's contribution to organizational performance. So when you now do all of that, it now also, another unique thing about this model is once you start talking about AMO, you start talking about line managers, right? The idea here is that the HR department alone cannot deliver HR. So if you think about it, who is closer to the employees, the line manager or the HR department?
I think the line manager.
Exactly. Line manager is much closer, right? The HR department may be in headquarters somewhere in Ericsson, Sweden or wherever. So this now, part of this model shows that a lot of what the HR department should be doing is to support and train these line managers to deliver the actual people management, because the actual people management will be done by them. The implementation, the leading, the controlling, the enacting will be done. The performance management will be done by the line managers. So a big focus of this model is on what the HR department does to line managers, not directly to employees, right? And then that will not translate eventually into higher motivation levels, job satisfaction levels, higher organizational commitment, right? And and that will then also translate into increased performance and discretionary behavior. Discretionary behavior simply means going the extra mile. Employees who are willing to go the extra mile at work, right? And therefore you have good company performance, right? So that is the key idea or key concept in this model, right? So we've looked at quite a few models. Let's try to get it to look. So that brings us to the difference between normal HRM and strategic HRM. So some companies just do HRM traditionally, right, rather than in a strategic manner, right? So if you're doing HRM traditionally, unfortunately, quite a lot of companies still do it. You are reactive rather than proactive. You are waiting for problems to occur. You're waiting for people to resign or quit, and then you need to replace them. You're not thinking 2-3 years ahead. What are the skills and numbers of people we need? Let's proactively start planning to recruit, to train, to upskill, and so on, right? It's more about administering your workforce rather than, direct managing and direct employee efforts to organizational goals, aligning employees to organizational goals, right? So strategic HRM we saw the idea of matching your different aspects of HRM, your recruitment, your training to match it, to support each other, but also matching to your external environment. So it's more cohesive, whereas traditional HRM is disjointed. You just have your training policy, your recruitment policy, and they may not support each other. So your traditional HRM obviously just focus on your employee relations with trade unions or individual employees, whereas strategic HRM will look also at both the internal but also the external relations with stakeholders, wider stakeholders. It's more long-term. Traditional HRM tends to be very short-term and reactive. Strategic HRM tends to be more long-term and proactive. We look more at people and knowledge, developing people and knowledge flows, knowledge management, people management, not just in terms of more capital or more products. To us, the employees and assets we develop. Our assets are not just our capital, our financial capital in the bank, or our products in the warehouse. Our assets are also our people, so we need to invest in them. So we want to look at investing in them rather than looking at them as a cost we need to minimize. Right? So rather than looking at them as a cost center, than investment opportunity, and so on. And then the idea of being flexible and flexibility is talk about that. So that's these are the things you start seeing.
Sorry, what's the difference between this investment center and a cost center? Accountability?
So if you are a manager, right, of a department, you will have a budget to run that department, right? Now your budget, you can be told to run that budget either as a cost center, that is, everything there is a cost, and your job is to minimize the cost, right? Or you can run it as an investment center. That is, the money you spend there, you are looking for a return on investment. So you are willing to spend a bit more money because you can see some outcomes coming. So very simply, let's look at your HR department. If you view your HR department as a cost center, then you want to spend as little as possible on training. You want to spend as little as possible on recruitment, cost of recruitment. You want to spend on assessment centers. You want to spend as little as possible on talent management. You want to spend as little as possible on rewards, on salaries, right? Because your job is to say this HR budget as a cost center is how do I bring it down or keep it at this limit. If you're allowed to run it as an investment center, then you identify not everything, but you identify the ones that if you invest in, is it training or is it recruitment? What are the key things that if I invest in, I can identify a clear return, a clear improvement that gives a business benefit. Right? So generally, you would tend to be more willing to approve certain expenses because you view them. So if your HR team says, there's this new training in leadership we think will be very good for our employees. It costs $100,000. Can we do it? You look at it as an investment and say, okay, if you can show me that in 1 year's time, these are the business benefits that will come out of these employees attending this training now, then I'll pay for it. But if you look at it as a cost center, you say, oh, well, we need to train them. Let's look for the cheapest training possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
So it's like that. So let's have a quick look. We'll look at the Tesla example very soon. Sorry. Okay. So we've done that one. So a lot of these things in this slide we've already talked about. The importance of strategic HRM to organizations. So you can read this up yourself, but we covered a lot of the stuff here, right? which now leads us to, sorry, trying to move the slide, so I think that's the next slide. So what are the key issues, right, that you face in terms of strategic HRM, especially in modern day organizations, right? So things like internationalization of market integration. So a lot of companies are going global now. Even small, medium enterprises have global markets and are selling on Amazon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a key HRM issue, how preparing your staff to be able to support that internationalization approach and playing in key global markets in a competitive manner. Obviously, the pace of technological change is amazing right now. New technology, new apps, new everything coming out, social media. What is the implication for strategic HRM? How can you leverage this technology and social media, to do better HRM, better organizational performance? New concepts of general management, so new ideas around how to lead and manage people. Cross-cultural factors, because of globalization, obviously we have migration, so we have a lot of local companies, but now having people from different cultures working there, right? And we also have more companies going global, opening branches in Sudan and so on, like Ericsson has done. I'm guessing 10 years ago, Ericsson was probably not in Sudan. So training the employees to be able to cope in different cultures and to work with people from different cultures, and using that as a benefit for the organization. And then the idea of the economic trend transferring from developed to developing countries in the world, so we look at the rise of China, the rise of BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and how that changes. So a lot of economic power coming now to those countries, a lot of your supply chain now having to come from those countries because their companies, their multinationals are growing stronger, so having a strategic foothold or strategic partnerships with organizations in those countries becomes key for HRM. Right. So these are some contemporary challenges, that go around with your normal ones around your business, matching your business strategy, external environment, demographic trends. For instance, more women in the employment sector, more migrants in the employment sector, more youth in the employment sector. Those are some demographic trends, and knowledge management we talked about. So these are key things you need to start thinking about in terms of developing your HR strategy. So assessing the purpose of strategic HRM, right? The idea here is to be able to assess the contribution HRM makes and stimulate interest among employees and HR practitioners in this. Provide a sense of direction in often turbulent environments, business environments. Providing strategic guidelines. The ultimate test of the reality of strategic HRM is the extent to which it has stimulated action by employees to cope with changing business environments. So does your HRM prepare your organization for change and support that change to cope with turbulent and dynamic, fast-paced business, fast-changing business environments? So the overall corporate purpose, and that the HR supports this, your overall vision and values. So these are the things you need to look at. So some more things. Process of developing strategy within the organization exists and is understood, and there is explicit constitution of HR dimension. So is HR incorporated in your overall strategic management process of your company? The organization at all levels establishes responsibility and accountability for human resource management, and then includes the responsibility to identify and interact with social, political, and technology and economic environments. So if your organization ticks these boxes, then we can start saying that you're doing good strategic HRM. These are the things that we look at to say, is there effective strategic HRM? How do we assess if your company has effective strategic HRM? These are the things. Right. So I don't know how familiar you are with Tesco. Is Tesco in India?
I'm actually from Pakistan. No, Tesco is not in. No, Tesco is not.
No. Tesco is a big supermarket in the UK, and in Hong Kong, China. It's expanded internationally to a few countries. So UK's largest supermarket, more than 240,000 employees, a very famous CEO. During the last few years, Tesco was known for its participative management, which helped the organization develop and be very successful. It focused on obviously customer relations, constant improvement, welfare of employees. So one of the things Tesco did innovatively was to introduce a Tesco loyalty card. So if you are shopping, every time you shop, you have a Tesco card as a customer, and it gives you points for the things you buy in the supermarket. So after every few months, if you've shopped a lot on Tesco, you've been loyal to them, you get a lot of points, and then that they will now give you vouchers to spend in the shop. So basically, you get some extra money to do extra shopping with. For being loyal, they give you some sort of. So rather than give a discount on prices, they encourage loyalty by continuous shopping. So they did all of that, but to do that, they first of all had to put an effective strategic HRM plan in place to have a workforce that could support all of these ideas. Right. So the idea of employee champions are very strong in the HRM. So from the example of Tesco, we saw their focus on some of the benefits that strategic HRM brought was improved retention, boosting of organizational performance, different HR policies provided some good replies that are very necessary for the organizational strategy. There was also a strong emphasis on knowledge management. So from your loyalty card, not only was it encouraging customers to be loyal to Tesco and not go to any other supermarket, it was also getting data, knowledge on customer shopping preferences, the kind of goods they prefer, the combination of goods they preferred. So what's now started happening is Tesco started using that knowledge management, obviously with the HR behind it. They could now use this knowledge. So for instance, if you notice that people who buy Coca-Cola tend to buy potato crisps. So when they now start redesigning the supermarkets, they started putting those goods together to make your shopping easier, right? If they notice that people who are buying certain products over other products, then they start stocking those ones more, and so on and so forth. So they use knowledge quite effectively, obviously, because they put some good strategic HRM in place for knowledge management and things like that. So you can read up on their training and training plans and all of that, but they had a very structured training plan. Talked to some of their Tesco HR at that point. It was quite good. Yeah. Career development, they were very strong on that, which motivated the employees, obviously. So development of competencies and so on. So the third key thing we need to cover very quickly now is the idea of the HR function. So we've been talking about this, so this is almost like a recap. The key HR functions we've already mentioned. If you remember the Michigan model, BAT model, we were already mentioning things like recruitment and selection, designing the organization and workflows and work structures, change management and business transformation, supporting that, performance management, employee relations and industrial relations with trade unions, workforce analysis or HR analysis as some people call it, rewards and compensation, salary and benefits, training and development. So these are key functional areas of HR department. Now, if you are working in a big company like Tesco, their HR department will be divided into sub-units. So they will have a training unit, training and development unit, a reward unit, and so on. But obviously, in smaller companies, you will not have that level of specialization and decentralization to be all structured together. But when we talk about HR, these are the key things you have to keep at the back of your mind. These are the things you are doing. So we've talked a lot about globalization. So just again to recap, factors that are driving working of strategic HRM with other departments. So strategic HRM is interface with other departments, marketing and operations, and so on. Their globalization, talent shortages, labor costs, technological changes, and so on. Right. So we start talking about strategic HRM playing the people in the HRM department playing different roles, that of a change agent, that of a strategic business partner, employee champion, and so on and so forth. So we wear multiple hats as a HRM practitioner. You have to obviously support business strategy through strategic advice as a strategic business partner. You have to support change in organizations, whatever change is going on, get people to buy in, employees to buy in as a change agent, and be an advocate or champion of employees and their welfare and their how you treat employees fairly. You know. So some key references that we've used in the slides are there, and I think that brings us to the end of the presentation. So are there any questions?
No, that's fine. It was a good presentation. I will just go through it again. But yeah, I mean, most of the concepts are clear to me. I mean, these are obviously the new things from. So I mean, from the technical background. So I'm just getting to know these things. So it's good actually. The concepts are getting clear.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, and see you. I think the next scheduled meeting is probably in a week's time.
Yeah.
So see you then. And as time goes on, we'll also start looking a bit more closely at the assessments.
Okay. And then in the next week we'll be discussing the assessments, right?
We'll start talking about it a little bit.
Okay.
We'll start talking about, since there are quite a few things to do, we'll start introducing the concepts. But we'll have at least one dedicated section just for assessment.
Okay. Okay. That's fine. That's fine. Okay.
Okay. So have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. Same to you. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Bye-bye.